have a pet at home that you have never nature journaled? In this video, I interview Akshay and Gargi about how they nature journal their pet. They share 4 reasons why nature journaling your pet is a good idea and 10 tips on how to do it best. And if you stay all the way till the end, there's a bonus tip.
Hi, Akshay and Gargi.
Hey, Marley.
I know that you have a pet now and that you've been nature journaling your pet. So I wanted to ask you some questions because I think that there's a lot of people that have pets and maybe they've never nature journaled their pets before. So what inspired you to nature journal your pet in the first place?
You want to go?
You go.
So, I think our love for, I would say we started off with being the people who are very scared of insects.
Uh-huh.
And the occasional visits to Stephanie's place to sketch her insects got us inspired and excited to at least attempt to have our own pet insect.
Yeah.
And being in the whole quarantine situation really helped because we had a lot of time to be able to look at our pet. So
Yeah.
at that point, we felt so envious of people who have pets at home all the time. And I think we wanted something that we could have in front of each other so we could just study it over and over again.
Yeah.
So that's how we got started.
Cool.
Yeah.
So
What got us to nature journal it was I think the goal for us was the other way around. It was more of like, oh, we want a pet for nature journaling rather than, oh, we have a pet now and we want to nature journal it. So it started off like that, and that is our mindset to start with. So both of us actually got we got a new journal each for our pet, which is say hi to Mithun. She is a beautiful ghost mantis, or the scientific name is Phylocrania paradoxa.
cool. Wow. Okay, so that's interesting. So it sounds like what you're saying is that you specifically got a pet for nature journaling.
That is accurate in all good senses. Yes.
Okay, great. So what are some of the benefits of having a pet as a nature journal subject as compared to, like an animal out in the wilderness or some of the other subjects that people nature journal? And maybe we should stick to animals for right now, but so what is the benefit of having a pet to nature journal as opposed to like an animal outside or something?
I can go first. In my opinion, we've never had a pet before, but what we have realized is during the weekdays, especially when you have a 12-hour workday, which is not in nature, and you're sitting in front of your Mac. When you come back home, it's really difficult a lot of times to just go out, and especially if it's dark, you don't have that option, and then you don't want to sit in front of a screen and nature journal again, and so you just want to take a step back. In that case, pets are awesome because they are with you right after work. So weekday journaling can be super exciting, and
Yeah.
that's my take on that.
And
Okay.
and the way I thought about it, so we went to Africa with Jack and you and the entire group last year, and I think that was the fastest growth in terms of journaling for us, just because the feedback loop was so fast. We would start with sketching something, and then there was a lot of activity happening each day, and then we moved from like being very careful on our journal page to realizing that it's not going to happen if we spend so much time on one thing for a very long time. And I think that's another added advantage, just because you are in the mindset of sketching your pet and it's in front of you and there's a lot of activity happening, especially if the pet is absolutely unknown. Like, we know so little about the insect that we have, and I'm sure a lot of people know very little about, say, the pets that they have. There's a lot of activity happening all the time, so it's helpful to be able to see all the changes and the transitions that are happening, and the feedback loop is so quick that you can keep trying a lot of different nature journaling techniques with your pet each. I think that was the biggest advantage, the fact that you learn and try different things every day because you have it in front of you.
Wow, that's so cool. And that leads right into my next question, which was going to be what nature journaling techniques do you think are most suited for using with a pet?
So just to begin with, I think it can be very, very varied, because you can start with doing deep dives. Like, one of the techniques that I also spoke in one of our previous conversations is looking at it on a high level and then zooming in on each individual part, at least on the outside, then thinking of its movements, mechanics, and seeing how all of that works. And we tend to get very focused on journaling in a certain way, and when you start realizing that the questions are sounding similar, you think of, okay, what are the other techniques that we can think of? We discussed zoom in. Can we think of some way of like recording a cross section by obviously not cross sectioning your
Yeah.
imagining what that would look like? And yeah, do you want to show some?
Yeah, for me, is it okay if we show our pages? Maybe a
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think one key technique for us has been measurements. It's
Mhm.
super important for us to measure, because every time Mithun or our mantis molds, there are so many changes coming in, so we end up measuring it all the time.
And
Yes.
one learning that we had there was that you might not know what measurements to get, because you don't know what changes over time. So you can start with overdoing and getting a lot of extra things in, but eventually you will learn as to what measurements are important, or you'll ask questions about certain things that will help you formulate what kind of information to gather.
Got it.
And initially we were thinking more in terms of okay, we need to specifically say, at least in my head, it was like, okay, we need to specifically collect certain amount of data and we need to focus on those fronts. So for example, we thought about having just a page or an area for the feeding behavior, or just a, like she had. Yeah, so just a page for that. And then that's one way we thought about. The other way, which I was thinking about, was more in terms of, you never know what observation you want on a daily basis. And so if you start channelizing before you learn about your pet better, it might just end up into buckets and missing out on the other things. So the other idea would be like so what I've done is I just mark out my calendar days and say, okay, on this day, I've seen all these different things. And whatever I can observe, or whatever I observe, just put it down as raw data. And then at the end of it, so a lot of times I would just have like days written on the end of my edge of my pages, and just recording everything that happened on that day. And so that allows me to then later, when I flip through things, say, okay, between this and this day, then I can condense and plot my data and the way I want it.
Interesting.
Another technique that we used was using a lot of diagrams to capture the movements. Doing that helped us think differently, because now we were thinking about, by diagramming and not focusing on just like one pose, we started to think about the different movements that the pets can have, or the mechanics of how the animal moves. Like when it jumps, what kind of muscles does it use? Does it even have muscles? Does it does it have bones? So just coming down and learning about those things come when you start to record your information differently each time.
Yeah, so it seems like some of those things would be much harder to do on a wild animal than with a pet.
For sure.
Okay. And it seems like also your pet is you got it at an early stage, right? So it still has a lot of growth to go. So it seems like pets that are, when people first get them, that would probably be a good time to start nature journaling it, at least for like some of these like measurement type things.
Yeah,
correct.
Because we've also noticed some changes in behaviors as she grew and on different days, which we could try to correlate. Just because we were trying to gather data about everything, we have been trying to correlate when she's very active with whether she ate too much that day, or when she's not active to, hey, is she going to mold? So in similar cases for animals and other pets, people could think about how the behavior changes as the insect or the animal grows over time, and whether that has something to do with their adaptation. Could it be related to their ancestors, and like just how they lived in the wild? Is there any similarity between between them and their wild cousins. So I think you can go to a lot of different ways with these, a lot of different places with these thoughts.
Cool. Wow, that's great. So what are some things that you've learned in this process that you would recommend for other people that want to try nature journaling their pets?
I think for me, one of the biggest things was experimentation. I think that's something that we haven't had the opportunity to do in the past. And this time we decided that some of the things, of course, we can Google them, but because the insect, our pet is not going anywhere, we have the opportunity to set up experiments to be able to answer our questions. So say if we have a question around, hey, do you think it has a preference for a certain color, or can it see what are the different colors that it can see? Then thinking of ways and brainstorming with each other on how we can conduct experiments and gather data in a way that we could try and answer those questions ourselves based on observations.
Yeah.
So
I would totally agree with that. I think that came to my mind the first thing you asked the question, because for us, for example, we've tried to like take a step back and go back into the old school of trying to wonder first and try and experiment a lot of things before we actually jumped into a white paper on Google or some research that's going on mantises. And there's not a lot. Like a lot of times we just don't have a lot of information. And so just wondering about that to start with. So a lot of times what I've done is we basically have a lot of these thought maps. So we just like brainstorm saying that, okay, these are all the ideas coming to our head and this was one on a vision of the mantis. And so just to put it down, and it really is, it's a lot of fun just to go through that and then going back. And what we did was we also then once we get our ideas in, we ended up researching certain papers. So these are like sketch notes from other research papers, trying to understand theories, and then putting both of them together, and then trying to come down to a consensus of, hey, this is our mantis, and this is our pet, and how does this relate to the pet?
Cool. So you're connecting stuff. So you recommend people try doing some of their own experiments and instead of just looking things up online right away. Cool. Okay. So do you think you have a very interesting and sort of exotic pet? So do you think that it would be, that these ideas and nature journaling would work for more boring pets, or like more common pets like cats, dogs, goldfish?
I think there is a dimension of when it comes to cats and dogs, because they are I would say cognitively, at least they express emotions or they react to emotions. And I think that's an extremely exciting, complex field, which you can start mapping on your journal. How's the cat feeling? How did it react to you? Like, those mood changes. I would say that's a whole amazing dimension I would want to do if we ever have a cat and dog.
Yeah, it would be very interesting to think of when someone's training their cat or dog, how long does it take to train on certain aspects, and why do the pets respond faster to some kind of training mechanisms versus some other? So I think all of that would be very, very interesting.
The other thing I can think about is interactions with a different cat or a dog. A lot of times, for example, mantis, they're just not social insects. They just eat each other or something. So we can't really have that interaction going. But for cats and dogs, that could be awesome. Like, how does a cat react to a different pet cat or a stray cat, and how does that go about? Same for dogs.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, it's funny because the two of you make cats and dogs sound like the most fascinating animals ever. So why do you think more people, like if you go on the Nature Journal Club page and scroll through thousands of posts, why do you think there aren't very many Nature Journal posts about cats and dogs?
I think humans in general just want novelty and they get bored of seeing the same thing every day. So I would imagine that is one of the reasons why people avoid maybe journaling their pets. That would be a guess. But I think if we start to draw or nature journal something that we see every day, it just gives the perfect practice pad to go out in the field and think differently, just because uh, the same point, you see your pets every day.
Yeah.
And
The other thing I can think about is, especially with pets, which are extremely common, cats and dogs, there's so many studies out there on these subjects, as compared to an exotic insect, or something that's not studied that well. I think that, it's so easy for all of us to just like, all right, cool. You know what? Instead of going through a series of month-long experiments, or like, trying out something by yourself, we just wrap it up in like a half an hour research paper, and it's like, oh my god, this is so fascinating. And like, probably in a month's time, you can get through every aspect, or you can open a new curiosity door and close it in a month's time. And that way, you can really get saturated very fast. And I would recommend sort of taking a step back. I know it's not easy, but just like not Googling for a while. I don't say that don't Google it. It's always good to like wrap up that information, because the more information you get, the more ideas you will also get to like, understand your pet and journal better. So always, but do like give it a few days. When you have a question, give it a week for yourself to journal on your page, and then go look up stuff the weekend when it comes down, and then, okay, cool, this made sense.
Got it. So maybe the fact that there's so much information, and yeah, just so much information about cats and dogs already, it makes it sort of feel like there's not really anything that we can do that's new or important.
Yeah.
Okay, well, on that note, since a lot of people at home don't have praying mantis pets or anything like that, what is some like motivation, just some words of motivation or ideas that you would give for people to try nature journaling their pets at home?
it opens doors to thinking about a lot of different animals, and comparing your studies with, say, if you have a dog, you could study the movements of the dog, go to a zoo and see how that differs from, say, that of a lion or a tiger, and try to think of what is it about the muscle structure, or how are they structured differently to be able to perform different activities. I think it just teaches you how to think about it, gives you a framework to think about the uh, broader set of animals out there in the wild.
Hmm.
It's the perfect practice pad.
And
I think it also helps you connect with your pet more, because we never thought we would be attached to an insect. But now, when she doesn't do something that we thought it should have done by now, like why is she not eating? And then we constantly think, it gives us some more ideas or data points to go back to and think about, hey, these could be the reasons, and we probably can troubleshoot it. So I think it also helps us learn that we can be more responsible for another thing and be more attached to a pet that's in our home. Just helps us connect more with the human side of us.
That's
and
really cool.
so I'm gonna wrap it up. But what I think is, most of us, especially on the nature living group, we have it in us, or at least we have trained a little bit with the community of like, we are going to think about curiosity, think about how things work in nature, and we go out and we practice that. And I'm quite confident that unconsciously we do that even with our pets, the ones which we don't journal at home, and that happens in your brain unconsciously. Now think about the same thing when you go out, look at a bird, you're like trying to put that thought process on paper and externalize that, so that it's easier for you to connect the dots. Since you're already doing that with your pet in your brain, why not just put it on your paper?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I think people are nervous about not being able to sketch their pet correctly or
Yeah.
make it beautiful, which I think I've realized in the past, that when I had a friend who was trying to draw her and her dog, and she was so attached to the dog that she didn't want to make a bad picture of it. So maybe you could start with just doing block diagrams or draw a dot and don't stress over making the perfect dog picture or have a diagram to just focus on capturing the information. That might help.
So it sounds like detaching the emotional connection a little bit might help people detach from the outcome of their drawing. I think that's something that I've noticed with things that I care a lot about or have an emotional attachment to. It's harder to make a drawing without worrying about how pretty the picture looks. So that makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of these ideas. I hope everyone gets inspired to nature journal their pets now.
I hope so too. It's a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun, and we all connect so well when we journal something.
Great.
So,
and you will be surprised. You will be surprised about the amount of curiosity that the community shows towards your pet. We've got so many ideas from other friends on the Nature Journal group on what kind of experiments we could run. So who knows, when you sketch your dog or a cat, you will be able to speak with your friends about what are the experiments that they ran and what are the things that they learned about their pet, and you'll be able to make more friends.
Yay, that is really good motivation for people. Cool, thank you so much, you guys.
If you learned something new or had fun during this video, subscribe to my channel. And if you can't wait all the way until next week for the next episode of the show, check out these videos here.